Welcome back to the commonly used Excel charts and functions video series. Today in lesson 20, we will cover SumIF and SumIFs. Alright, we'll cover two SumIF functions today, highlighted in the blue text here, SumIF and SumIFs. We'll also use the handbag sales data table to the left to work through each function. Let's start with the SumIF function. I'm interested in calculating the total quantity of each size of handbags sold, and let's start with small. I'm going to type in my function and select it. You can see that there's three different arguments in the SumIF syntax, the first being the range. This will be the criteria range, and since we're interested in small handbags, our criteria range will be the size column. Next is our criteria. You must remember that criteria always needs to be in double quotations, so we'll type out the word small. Lastly is the sum range. In this case, it'll be our quantity column. I'll put a closing bracket and press enter. Now I'll do the same for large handbags. Now let's move on to SumIFs. SumIFs is similar to SumIF, but more than one selection criteria can be used. In this case, I'm looking for the total number of handbags sold that are both large and white. So let's start by typing in our function and selecting it. Looking at the syntax, you can see that it's a bit different than the SumIF function. We're going to start with our sum range this time, which will be the quantity column. Next, we'll move on to our first criteria range. Now, since we're looking for large and white handbags, this can be either the size or color column. It doesn't matter which one we do first. I'm going to do the size column first. Now we will move on to our criteria that corresponds to our first criteria range. Since we did the size column as our first criteria range, our first criteria then needs to be large. But remember, criteria always belongs in double quotations. Then we'll move on to our second criteria range, which will be the color column. And then our second criteria, which again belongs in double quotations. All right, I'll do the same thing now, but with large and black handbags. One thing I quickly wanted to mention is that in some cases, SumIF and SumIFs are not the most efficient way of performing a calculation. Pivot tables can be a much better choice. We cover pivot tables in lesson 11. That concludes today's lesson where we learned SumIF and SumIFs. In the next lesson, we will learn average with if. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next lesson.